Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Kamma daf Kupei. I will already tell everyone that Be'ezrat Hashem, the Siyum will be taking place on Sunday, March 3rd. Okay, we actually finished Bava Kamma on Thursday. We're going to have the Siyum on Sunday. Rabbi Shimoni is going to be teaching. Fascinating topic connecting with what's going on nowadays. We're going to hear from Terry Kravosha, who's a lawyer, from her experience learning the daf and connecting it, from her lawyer's perspective. So I invite everyone to come. One change from normal that's very important to know is a very long daf, a complete daf. So I'm actually going to teach the daf on Thursday morning, other than the very last section. In the last section, I will teach at the Siyum. So it will be different than usual. We won't be learning the whole long daf because I wanted to have time for other shiurim. Okay, that's regarding the Siyum. Today's daf is dedicated in memory of all the soldiers who were killed this week and for refuah shlema to all those injured. Okay, we will start with yesterday's daf. We had a quick review. We had noten lo et hakeren, right? You have to get the keren to the principal of what you stole to the person who you stole it from, but you don't have to get them the chomesh. From here, and Rashi said it was from that line, again, different opinions about where exactly it was derived from. They derive the fact that the Mishna has to tell you this, Rashi says, is what leads the Gemara to conclude chomesh must be a monetary payment and not for atonement. It doesn't go on the side of the asham, which we thought. It goes together with the keren. You only do it if you admit, but it's a monetary payment for the nigzal. Otherwise, they wouldn't have to tell you. It doesn't have to get all the way there. It would have been obvious because it's just for your own atonement purposes. Of course, it's not critical that it get to the nigzal. So the fact that they have to tell you means it's a monetary payment. If it's a monetary payment, what's the point? What's the relevance? Well, if someone owes money and dies, that monetary payment goes to their heirs. And that's what the conclusion from the Mishna was. However, this contradicts a braita where it says explicitly the heirs do not have to. So now we have to figure out what's going on here. How can we resolve this contradiction? Rav Nachman had said, one case is where they admitted, after they swore, they admitted they lied. Okay, the father, let's say. The second case is where the father didn't admit it. Okay, well, if the father or the son, neither one admitted it. Well, if the father or the son didn't admit it, and that's why, right? No, that's why they don't pay the chomesh, but then they don't have to pay the keren. There's no proof at all that they stole. So how could that possibly be? So then we said, okay, so now we're going to get to the answer. And now they say, right, first, what we did at the end of yesterday's daf was prove, how do we know that it's clear that you pay the keren? Okay, because again, you don't pay the chomesh, but you do pay the keren. And that makes no sense. If there's no testimony against you and there's no confession that you did it, then how on earth will we make you pay the principal? There's no proof that you stole. So we're now going to explain. Okay, so now we're going to 6 lines from the bottom of yesterday's daf. My lohoda aviv hoda beno. There is a hoda. It's just the father didn't admit to it. The father lied under oath, let's say, denied the claim. The son continued and denied the claim. And then the son admitted that it was a lie and that really he owed the money. So now this still isn't going to be so easy. And we're going to end up, according to Rav Nachman, we're going to have to explain it, that a number of different factors have to be the case for this to actually work. And it's going to be a little bit complicated. In general, I will warn you, it's quite a complicated daf and quite a long daf. Well, hopefully we'll get through it. So now, my lohoda vivoda beno, v'nitchayev beno chomesh hashvuah. So now the Gemara is going to ask, wait a minute, nitchayev beno chomesh hashvuah didei. If the son lied and denied the father's theft and said, I don't have any stolen item by me, and then admitted I do, well, then basically the son turns into a thief and should pay chomesh because of his own shvuah. So that doesn't make any sense. So why do we say the heir doesn't have to pay the chomesh? Amrei b'she'ein zelak kayem. Well, they say, now here, we're going to get to this in the Mishna on your daf kuf yud aleph. I'm going to try not to explain anything that's not necessary 100% for this daf or that we'll get to soon. There we'll explain why this whole thing is the case and how it exactly works. If the gzela is kayemet, if the object is existing, then the child has to return it if the father stole. But if the item is no longer in existence, the father stole something and doesn't have it anymore, it got lost, stolen, something, whatever, the father doesn't have to, the heirs don't need to return the value. So that's why, because when the son denies that the father had stolen anything and then said, well, actually I lied, well, the son went about to pay it anyway. So it's not a false claim because on money, because the son didn't have to pay the money anyway. So then they say, wait a minute. If the son didn't have to pay the money anyway, well, then the braita makes no sense. As we're trying to explain the braita, but the braita said no chomesh, yes keren. So in other words, first they thought maybe I kind of gave too much information at first because I already gave the information we needed for this line. But right, they wanted to say maybe if it's not existent, then the child doesn't have to pay the chomesh. But if it's not existent, he doesn't even have to pay the keren. So they answer lo tzricha deikar achrayut nechasim. What is it? It's that there was land. The father left land. Now, so we said if the theft, the item that was stolen, is not actually in existence anymore, the child doesn't have to pay. But that's if the child was left only money and movable property by the father. But if the child was left land, then the land was liened to the stolen item, to the person who was stolen from. So that's why. So on that, the child, now it gets tricky because, now from here, for the next two lines, Rashi actually takes this out. And it's a bit of a complicated section, and Rashi thinks it doesn't actually make sense halachically and therefore removes it. But we're going to read it anyway. So what if there's a achrayut nechasim? That's what we want to say again. We always have to get to. That's why the child doesn't have to pay the chomesh, but does have to pay the value of the item. But now we say they shouldn't even have to pay the value of the item. Why? Because on what basis do we know that this item was stolen? On the kid's admission. Well, milva al pehi, umilva al pehi, no gove lo min hayorshim v'lo min halakuchot. We only collect things from orphans if it was a written document. And if the orphan just admits that it was stolen, there's no written document. It's more like a milva al peh. It's more like a loan that was just an oral agreement. An oral agreement can't be collected not from lien property and not from children, orphans. So in the end, the keren can't be, if you're going to say the case is, again, we have to go through a whole bunch of things. The father didn't admit, right? The father didn't admit, but the son did, right? Took an oath and admitted. Then we have to say it was, the object wasn't in existence anymore. We also have to say that the father left land, but still you shouldn't have to pay the keren. So what do they answer? B'sha'amad b'din. Okay, it must be a case where the father was already convicted. If the father was convicted in court about this, then already there was an obligation and the property was liened to it in the father's lifetime. That can be passed on to the children. But then, again, we keep going back and forth. If it was clear that the father owed the money, and then the kid denies and says, we paid it back already, let's say, and then says, I lied, well, chomesh nami mishalim. Well, now the kid is denying a claim about his own land. So he should have to pay chomesh for his own sake. Rav Yoshua, we're finally going to end this very long-winded argument. She'ein meshamim chomesh al kfirat shi'abud karkaot. Okay, what does this mean? If you look at it only as the child's claim, in the end, what did the child admit? That I really owed money, but not money, not cash. I really owed land because my father was accused of land and of owing, my father was accused of stealing an item. On account of that, his property was liened. When he died, now all I have left to do, because there was a lien, I actually have to return this land. Well, the fact is, and this is a topic, we're talking all day really about this shvuat firat mamon. It's called an oath that I deny owing money. This oath of denying owing money is actually only applicable to movable property. It doesn't apply to land. It doesn't apply to slaves. Okay, that's not important right now, but it doesn't apply to land. It doesn't apply to land. That's why it hasn't paid the chomesh, because there is no chomesh payment if you deny a claim on land and take an oath about it. So therefore, we've come now to a conclusion as to why the child in that braita is liable for the keren, not liable for the chomesh. It has to have all the details that we discussed. I'm not going to review all of them again because we'll never finish the daf. And that's why it doesn't contradict our Mishna, because our Mishna was a case where the father, right, where the father was hodeh already. The father admitted already. There was a chomesh payment already instituted during his lifetime that could get passed on to the child because that's a mamon payment. Here, it's all generated by the child, which makes it totally different. Now we're going to have a different answer to the contradiction. Rav Amram, a much more simple answer. But again, what we call an ukimta, you have to say it's in some very unique case. What's the case of the braita? In other words, again, we're assuming our Mishna and the inference from our Mishna is correct. It really is a mamon payment. Why wouldn't it go to the child? Well, what happened? Again, probably, it doesn't really talk about this, but the father didn't deny the claim, so it didn't pass on to the child. The child denied the claim, but why did the child deny the claim? Because there was a sack of the father's that included the stolen item that he gave to someone to watch. It wasn't in the house. Sounds like Yaakov in the Trofim story, right, where he didn't know the idols were there, and he said, "I know they're not here. Right? We didn't steal your idols." So the child took an oath saying, "It's not in our house." He turned the house upside down, looked all over, stolen item, not here. So he took an oath that was actually a false oath because the father really did steal, but he thought he was telling the truth. That's going to be why there's no chomesh payment. So now, Keren mishalem deha'ita. In the end, right, the guy returns the sack and the kid looks in and says, "Oh, that's where the stolen item is." So of course he has to return the stolen item. Chomesh lo mishalem, but he doesn't have to pay chomesh. Why? But he thought he was telling the truth because he didn't know. So because of that. Okay, now we're going to move on to another issue in the Mishna. What did we say? The mitzvah of hashava, of returning the item, is only if the value of the item was a shava pruta. If it's less than a pruta, then it's not important, it's not significant, and you don't actually have to return it. So now you don't have to return it, right? Go all the way to the nigzal to give it to the nigzal, okay? And the question is, like, how much do you not really need to, right? We're not even going to get into this, but it seems like there's no mitzvah of hashavat aveda if it's not a pruta. Not important. So we're going to have two versions of Rav Papa about what he says about this, and then we're going to move on to Rava and have a whole slew of a statement of Rava and then a slew of questions about Rava relating to this, and then a bunch of things tangentially related. Amar Rav Papa, lo shanu ela she'en gzela kayemet. This is, by the way, only if the object is no longer in existence, and it was less than a pruta, then you don't need to return it. Gzela kayemet tzarich lelecha charav. Now, why? If the gzela is in existence, then you have to actually find the person and give it to them. Okay, why is that? Now, you might say, okay, I would think sentimental value, right? Oh, I'm going to keep your object in my house, even if it's not worth a lot. Maybe it's worth something to you, but that's not what they say. They say, maybe it will go up in value, meaning right now it's not a shava pruta, but value of items could change. It could later be worth a shava pruta, and that's why you have to return it. Some people say Rav Papa said the exact opposite. Rav Papa it doesn't matter whether it's in existence, non-existence. No matter what, you must go to the person's house and return it. The chiyuv of hashava, of bringing it to his house, exists. I'm sorry, doesn't exist. My mistake. Doesn't exist at all. You don't have to return it. We're not worried. Maybe the price will go up. Which makes sense in terms of theft because we usually return things at the value that they were at the time you stole, which is going to come into play in the next sugi. Now comes Rava. So we're going to have a statement of Rava, a question Rava is going to ask, and then we're going to move on to nazir and impurity. And Rava is going to ask a similar type question to the question he asks here about a nazir and the shaving of the hair of the nazir and about impurity in an earthenware vessel. Okay, so we're going to get a bit off topic. Gazal Amarava, Gazal Shalosh Agudot Shalosh Prutot. I stole 3 batches of things, items, that each one was worth, let's say 3 satchels of stuff. Each one was worth a pruta. V'huzlu v'amdu ashtayim. Then, before I returned it, the price went down. And the 3 together cost altogether 2. Let's say I returned 2 of them. Now I'm left with 1 bundle that was worth a pruta at the time of the theft. Right now is worth less than a pruta. So do I have to return that item that was left, that bundle? So he says, okay, if he returns 2, he must return the 3rd. Now, Tanatuna, we're going to prove this from a Mishna. This is a little bit strange. The commentaries say, we don't know why he went through this. He should have simply quoted the Mishnah, and this is going to make it easier for you to understand where he's going, because it's a bit of a complicated proof, but it's really simply what he's saying is, Remember that? All gazlanim pay based on the value it was at the moment they stole. So therefore, it doesn't matter if right now it's worth a pruta. It was worth more at the time you stole, and therefore you have to return it based on the value it was at the time you stole. So that would have been a little simpler, the commentaries say, but instead they chose this one, which is Tanatuna. You can learn it from a Mishnah. So it's a funny line, Tanatuna. It means you can learn it from a Mishnah. Gazal chametz v'avar alav Pesach. If you steal chametz, we're going to see this case also later today, so it's good we're reviewing this. This is a Mishnah we learned not so long ago. You steal chametz, and then Pesach comes. And at once Pesach comes and you didn't sell your chametz, this chametz is worth 0. However, since the stolen item is still in existence, I can return it as is, even though it's worth nothing. So, Omer lo haresha chalafanecha. I say, okay, here, take your chametz, even though right now it's worth nothing. Now, why is that? Tamid ite be'ene. That's because it exists. Haleta be'ene. But if it didn't exist, then what would I have to do? I wouldn't pay you 0, what it's valued at now. I would pay you what it was valued at the moment I stole. That's why it's basically, in other words, it's in a more complicated way. It's just saying all gazlanim pay. It's just giving an example where that issue is highlighted. Even though now it's worth 0, because originally it was worth something, by shilume, you have to pay. So therefore, hachanami, likewise here, even though this item now is worth less than a pruta, what's left? Since it was originally worth a pruta, I have to pay. By Rava, here comes Rava's question, though, based on that principle. He says, what if gazal shtei agudot bepruta? Different issue. I stole 2 bundles. Together, the 2 were worth a pruta. Let's just say each was a half a pruta. And I return 1. Now I'm left with another one. Now, first of all, I return something that's less than a pruta, and I'm left with something that's less than a pruta. So, mi amrinan, hashta leka gzela, do we say, look, there's nothing really stolen anymore that you have to return because it's only half a pruta? O dilma, halo hadra gzela dahavik abai. Or do you say, look, you stole something that was worth a pruta to begin with, and you didn't return it, so you have to return it, even though right now you're only left with half a pruta. Hadra pashta, after Rava asked the question, he answered the question in a very unclear, ambiguous way. Gzela einkan, hashava einkan. There's no gzela anymore. There's no stolen item by you because it's worth less than the pruta. And there's no hashava. Now, Gemara says, what do you mean there's no returning of this item? So, igzela einkan, hashava yeshkan. In other words, aren't those 2 sides of the same coin? If there's no theft, then you basically fulfilled your responsibility of returning it. So it should be hashava yeshkan. Why does it say hashava einkan? To which he answers, hachi kamar. They're not 2 sides of the same coin. Even though you don't have a real stolen item sitting with you, and therefore you don't have to return it, mitzvah hashava einkan. You actually, okay, now there's 2 ways to read this. You actually can't return it, meaning even if you were to return it, you will not fulfill your mitzvah of hashabat aveidah, because hashabat gzela, of returning a stolen item, because you can't, that's not called returning it when you return a half an item. It just doesn't count. That's a better way of explaining it because it's going to fit with the next sugya where we have the same type thing. Some people say, even though you don't really have a stolen item with you, you haven't fulfilled your mitzvah. Now it's different. You can't, or you haven't fulfilled your mitzvah of returning, which means to do the right thing, you should return the item. Okay? But the first reading really means there's no point to returning the item because even if you return it, you won't fulfill the mitzvah of returning an item because it's less than a pruta. The Amar Rav, and now here Rav is going to say the same thing with a nazir. Although it's not really the same thing. Haramru, nazir shegilach, v'shiur shtei sarot. We learned this in nazir. A nazir who shaves their hair. Nazir is supposed to shave all their hair. Now, when the nazir shaves and leaves 2 hairs is considered a shiur, right? If you leave 1 hair, it's as if you shaved all your hair. But once you leave 2 over, it's as if you didn't shave your hair. Lo asava lo klum. So if he left 2, he didn't do anything. Okay, that's a halacha. By Rava, meaning it's not considered shaving because you left 2 hairs. 2 hairs is an amount, a requisite amount of, if you still have that on your head, that means you didn't shave your hair. By Rava, but he asked the following question. What if you left 2 hairs and then you then shaved 1, which isn't like an amount of shaving because 1 hair doesn't even count as a requisite amount of having left, which means it's not really shaving if it's only 1 hair, just like it's not returning if it's only less than a pruta. And then the other hair fell out. So in the end, you have no hair. So you've gotten the result of the shaving without maybe doing the action of the shaving. So first, Amar le Rav Achami Difta le Ravini says something's wrong with this question. Nazir shegilech achat achat kamibay le Rava. Is he asking a question? What if the nazir shaves all, the whole time, 1 hair, then another hair? Let's say he just plucks out all his hair, 1 at a time. Okay. Because in this case, what happened? The nazir shaved off all the hair except 2 hairs, then shaved off another hair. Now, wouldn't that connect with the previous? So basically, I don't even understand Rava's question. Obviously, if you do 1 at a time and keep going, it would work. So if you basically stopped, took a little break, did another one, wouldn't it connect back with the previous? And then you'd be left with one hair and you'd be fine. So I don't even understand the question. So Amar Le, Ravina explains, what happened here was that you could take them all off all at once, doesn't matter, or one at a time, and then you stop. Then you had two left. One fell off. And then when you did the last one, there wasn't any more requirement to shave. So does that count or not? Okay, because you didn't shave to get to the point where there was only one left. One fell out before you did the last one. That's what Rava was asking. Mi amrina, do we say, Hashtamiyat haleka shiur? Say, look, in the end, you don't have hair. You're good. All we really needed was the result. Oh, Dilma halav giluachu, or maybe we don't call this shaving because to mikar hashir sarot. He left over two hairs, which meant the first shaving didn't count. And there weren't even two hairs to shave when he shaved the last one off. So maybe it's not considered an act of shaving. And if you remember the answer he gave last time, that's really what we're going to say. Hadar pashta, he then answers, se'ar ein kan giluach ein kan. There's no hair, but there's also no shaving. And first, the Gemara understands it the same way we originally understood the first. You say, "Ar kan giluach yesh kan." Aren't those two sides of the same coin, two different sides of the same coin? If you didn't need to shave because your hair is gone, then you fulfill the mitzvah of shaving. Now, hachi kamar apa pisha se'ar ein kan mitzvah giluach ein kan, and that fits better with the first interpretation we gave before, which is you cannot do the mitzvah of giluach. There's no way to do it at this point. You're stuck. Rava, another thing. Now, this isn't going to end with the same exact wording, okay, but it's similar to a certain extent. Rava, haramru. Okay, the thing you have to know here is basic rules of tuma of an earthenware vessel. You have a tent with a dead body or a house with a dead body. Everything in that house is tameh, including items that are in earthenware vessels that are open, okay, because the tuma goes inside the airspace. But if it's sealed shut, the things inside do not become impure. Okay, so if it's sealed shut, but there's a hole in it, then the tuma can get in the hole, depending on the size of the hole. I'm not going to get into that. It depends what you use the vessel for, how big the hole is. But if there's a hole, a certain size, let's just assume whatever size it is, then the tuma can get into the vessel, right? It's only if it's sealed shut without a hole X size, okay, whatever that size is. So now, what if you start sealing up that hole part way? So now it doesn't have the requisite amount of the hole that usually means tuma can go in, but it's just partially sealed and maybe the seal doesn't really count. So that's going to be his question. If you had a barrel that had a hole and then you sealed it up. By the way, there's a debate about what exactly, I'm going with the simpler interpretation of this case that we're talking about a vessel and the air, the tuma going into it. Some people talk about a chatzitza. I'm not going to get into that, but there's two ways to understand this Mishna. So this is a Mishna in Caleb. So you have a hole, ustamua shmarim, and you sealed in the entire thing with shmarim, with dregs of wine or something. It's fine. Hitzilua. Well, okay, you sealed it up. It's got no hole. The tumah doesn't go in anymore. But by Rava, comes Rava and says, based on this Mishna, agaf chetziyama. What if I filled in half the hole? And now, it doesn't have the requisite amount of a hole that would be a problem, but it's just kind of filled in and it's not filled in completely. I didn't really finish it. So do we view this as blocked or not? Amale Rav Yirmiyah Rav Ashi. Lav Mishnah Teinu Hizu. Isn't that not in the Mishnah in Caleb? Ditnan, it says there, that we just said. The continuation of that Mishnah says, if you put in a shoot, a little leaf or something, you have to put some material there, cement it in, something with some other material to fill it in, okay? Which sounds like you have to fill it in. If there were two smolot you put in, you basically have to put this, tar or something in on both sides, in between, okay? It has to be totally filled in. So tama de marach, halo marach lo. It sounds like if you didn't put that tar in, it doesn't work. So now if you did it partially, it shouldn't work. Shouldn't that be obvious why you've been asking this question? V'tavi ki agaf chetzia. Isn't that the same thing? Right? So Amrei, no. Rava says that's not the same thing. In the end, we're not going to have an answer to his question. But the point is, they said, how can you even ask this question? He's going to say, well, because of the following. Hatam ilo marach lo kai. If you just put a leaf in there, a branch, a twig, it's not going to stay unless you put the tar to get it to stick in there. But in our case, agaf chatzia b'midi dekai kai. But here you're filling it in halfway, in a way that it will stay in place. So that's a different situation. Okay. So therefore, those are Rava's questions. Now we're moving on to another question of Rava. Rava. And from here till most of the daf, now we're going to talk about this topic that we've discussed before, which is davar hagorem lemamon kemamon dami. You might remember we discussed this. Something that could cause a potential financial obligation, even if it's not worth anything. We're going to start with our chametz b'Pesach. That's really the case of chametz b'Pesach, where you have something that's worth nothing. Right? It was chametz, it was worth something. Now it's worth nothing. You stole it when it was worth something. It's now worth nothing. You can theoretically just return it as is. So it's worth nothing, but it actually has potential value, because if it gets stolen from me, I'll have to pay the value of it. So it could cause me a financial obligation, but only if it gets lost or stolen or something like that, because otherwise I could just return it as is and it doesn't cost me anything. So it's something that potentially could cause me to pay money. Okay, so now Rava says, so the same structure we keep doing. For a minute. Rava basically quotes a halacha, and then from there he springboards off to a question. Rava now asks, Nishba alav mahu. Well, since this could potentially cost me a financial loss, because if it gets stolen from me, basically, I'd have to pay you back the value. Well, what if I deny that I have this chametz b'Pesach when I really do have it? I stole it. I deny I have it. So we're back to this shvuat kfirat mamon, this shvua that I deny owing you money when I actually was lying. If I admit that I lied, then what happens? If I admit that I lied, I have to pay chomesh and bring an asham. Do those laws apply if I did it about this chametz b'Pesach? And here come the two sides. Okay, we're now at Amabet. Mi amrina, do we say, Kevan di'i mignav ba'eshilumele mamona kakafale? Since potentially this might cause me money to pay out of hand, because if it gets stolen from me, I'll have to pay you the value of the chametz. So I'm basically denying a financial claim. And therefore, yes, it falls into this category. If I denied it, and lied under oath, and then admitted, I'd have to pay chomesh and asham on it. Oh, dil mahashta miyat hamanach ba'afra ba'almahu v'lo kafar le'mamona. Or do we say, I denied a financial claim of something that's worth zero, and in the end, right, what chances are I'll still have it in my possession when I admit, and therefore I'm basically having a denial about zero, because in the end, I can just give it back to you and I don't have to pay any money and it's worth nothing. So how do we view this? So basically, this is another way of saying, right, is another ramification of this issue of, even though the Gemara doesn't say it in these words, but we saw this machloket before about, is davar hagorem lemamon kemamon dami, is something that causes me a financial obligation or a potential financial obligation, is it something or not? So now they say, Rava asked this question and he didn't know the answer. But milta dibai leil Rava, pshita leil Rava. To Raba, okay, don't get confused between Rava and Raba, okay, and the Gemara, the text is even going to get confused between them soon, but it's going to say Rava and it really means Raba, otherwise it doesn't make sense. But something that Rava asked, Rava knew the answer to. Da Amar Raba, what did Rava say? And now we're going to have a different case, totally different case, but where something could potentially cause me to have to pay, or to cause me actually to be exempt from something, which is going to mean there was value to what I denied. Okay, let's see. Sholi ganavta. You claim I stole your ox. V'hu omer, and I say, lo ganavti. No, I didn't steal it. Mativo etzlecha. So you say to me, but it's in your garden, it's in your yard, it's in your barn, it's in your whatever. What are you doing with it? So I say, oh, you see it in my garden? Oh, shomer chinam ani alav. Yeah, you gave it to me to watch. I didn't steal it. You're claiming I'm a thief. I'm claiming you gave it to me to watch. That's why it's in my house. Now, this is tricky because I'm claiming it's yours, which means basically I'm claiming I'm eventually going to return it to you. So theoretically, it's not a shvuat kfirat mamon. I'm denying your claim and I'm lying about it because in the end I did steal it. But what's the difference if I stole it or I'm watching it? I claim I'm a shomer. Either which way, I'm going to give it back to you, right? But what? So you would think it's not a shvuat kfirat mamon, like the chametz b'Pesach that wasn't worth anything. It's different, but it's kind of saying my denial isn't worth anything. But no, I am chayav here. Why? Because potentially, if it were to be stolen from me, my claim of shomer chinam saves me potential money. Why? Because if it were to be stolen from me, I basically don't even have to return anything, right? I get exempt. So that for me is a gain, a financial gain. It's better for me financially if I claim I'm a shomer chinam because I'm not liable in certain cases. So that potential that were it to be stolen from me, I won't have to put up money is actually saving me something. So my claim saves me potential money loss or money gain, basically, and therefore it's a kfirat mamon, okay? Because I'm trying to save myself, right? I could theoretically not have to return anything to you, right? And exempt myself. So now, because I gain from that, and then I lied about, as I tried to gain something for myself, which is not to have to pay you if it was stolen. So I gain from that. And therefore, I denied a monetary claim. So the question that Rava asked, Rava said, you do have to pay. If I said I'm a shomer chinam, I would have to return you the animal. And then I lied and I said, oh, really, I stole it. I'd have to return it with the chomesh and the asha. And likewise, a shomer sachar ani alav, if I claimed you hired me with and paid me, chayav, why? Because each case I have a way I could have exempted myself from something. Okay, there's a case, a shomer sachar has to pay for if it was stolen or lost, not like a shomer chinam that could just take an oath and say, oh, it was stolen from me. But shomer sachar could be exempt if there was onus, if it broke, not based on something I did or died. Shoel ani alav, if I said I'm a borrower where I'm actually chayav in almost everything, but I'm chayav in almost everything. Also here I'd be chayav because hare patar atzmo mimeta machmat melacha. Okay, I could exempt myself if while I was using the animal, which I was allowed to use the animal because I borrowed it to use, the animal died while it was working, then I'd be exempt. So again, there's some benefit I gain by saying this. And therefore, if I lied and said I was a shoel, I actually have to pay you the money once I admit. I have to pay you the chomesh and the asham also. Alma, afagav have a kain. Now here they're going to spell it out. Even though it's in existence, keva, in other words, and in existence, while right now it's in my property, it's no different if you claim I stole it and I claim I was a shomer chinam, either which way I'm going to have to return it to you. But keva de imignev mamona kakafar, if it was stolen from you, then I would deny. I would say, oh, I don't have to pay you. Then it would be financial value. Hashtanami mamona kakafar. We're going to view this whole thing because of the potential monetary value it has. Hachanami, likewise here with the chametz b'Pesach of Rava, avagav da'afar ba'almu, even though it's worth nothing now, kevan de'imigna, by shalumele mamona ma'alia, hashtanami mamona kakafrele. So same thing there. If it were to potentially be stolen, the chametz, I'd have to pay money. Therefore, by my claiming I didn't steal it, I'm actually, even though it's worth zero, it has potential for me to have to pay money. That potential is worth something. So basically, he says potential monetary value, even though it doesn't actually have monetary value right now, is considered monetary value, which means that if I make a false claim and then admit it, I'll have to pay the chomesh and bring the korban asha. Yativ, and here it has to be Raba, otherwise it doesn't make sense. Yativ Raba, who gave this answer, unless you say that Rava heard Raba's answer and decided to accept it, maybe you could say it's Rava. Most commentaries change it to Raba. V'ka'amar lahashmata, and he explains this, what he just explained. Eitiv Rav Amram la Rav Amram now comes and throws a question at this whole theory. He says, I'm going to show you a braita that shows exactly not what you said. And we're going to learn all sorts of other cases in the braita. And then later the Gemara is going to go through some of those questions, some of those lines and say something doesn't make sense here. But we'll go through the braita quickly because we're really looking for this one line. This is a quote from the Pasuk of Vayikra Parakeh where it talks about, it says, if you find the lost item and you deny it, Vinishbal Sheker, and you swear falsely. Here we're talking about, I deny a monetary claim. That's our topic. What do we learn from that? You have to be kicheshba. You have to deny the claim, the main part of the claim, not some side issue about it. What would be denying a side issue of it? So basically means you deny the central claim you actually agree with, but you deny some side issue. So let's see. Ketzad, sholiga nafta. V'omer lo ganavti. Okay, that seems pretty basic. So you say you stole, and I say I didn't steal. But now we're going to see. Mati bo etzlacha. So you say, what's it doing by you? Atamacharta lo. In other words, atamacharta lo. You sold it to me. Atana tatali b'matana. In other words, I don't deny that it's in my possession. I just deny how it got to me. You say I stole it. I say you sold it to me or gave it to me as a gift. Aviv mecharoli. Your father sold it to me. Avicha nitanoli b'matana. Your father gave it to me as a gift. Achal paratirat, it chased my para into my yard. That's what it's doing by me. Me'elav ba'etzli, it just came here on its own. To'eba derech mitzativ, it was wandering and I found it. Shomer chinam ani alav. Here's our case. This is why we brought this. I'm a shomer chinam, meaning again, yes, you're right, it's in my property because you asked me to watch it. That's a side issue because I agree that it's in my property. I just said, well, the reason is it's for a different reason than you think. Shomer sachar ani alav, shoel ani alav, same thing, right? I'm just a different kind of shomer. V'nishba v'hoda. Now let's see what the braita says. According to Raba, what should it say? You're not going to be liable. I'm sorry. You are. I just got confused. You are going to be liable because you denied something that has potential monetary benefit for you. Yachol yehei chayav. You might think you'd be liable, which is going to say, but you're not. So this clearly contradicts Raba. Talmud lomar b'checheshba pradamo debiikar. Okay, all these cases are exempted. So, big question on Rava. Rava says to him, "Amalei to do Allah. You fool! Why are you asking us a question on me?" I'm going to distinguish between the braita and what I was talking about. Ki tanya hi deka amalei hela. Ki kamina dekaima ba'agam. The braita is a case where you said, "What's your shore doing there?" And I said, "You asked me to watch it." And then I say, "But you want it back? Here, take it." And I give it to you. Well, if I give it to you right away, then it has no future potential money benefit for me because I'm giving it to you right now. That's why I don't have to pay the chomesh. But if it was in an agam and I say, oh yeah, I'm a shomer chinam, I'll give it to you at some future point, then it potentially, if someone were to steal it from me, there would be potential value gain for me. So that's why. Now we have to go back to some of these cases. I don't know if you were wondering this, but atamacharta lo, my modebi ikar ika. If I say you sold it to me and you claim I stole it, that's a total 100% zero, right? It's a total contradiction. Lo tzricha da amar le lo natati lach dame zil torach v'zil. Shkil torach v'zil. It's a case where I say, you sold it to me, but I didn't give you the money yet. Okay, it's obvious here, the fact that you're claiming it's stolen, you don't want to sell it to me, so I'll give it back to you, and here it is. Okay? Atana totalo avicha netanoli, you gave it to me, or your father gave it to me, my modebi ikarika, same question. That means you gave it to me. That means I didn't steal it. That's a classic, I'm totally denying your claim. So again, they're going to say, when you give someone a gift, sometimes you give it with strings attached. So you gave it to me, or your father gave it to me, expecting I was going to do something for you. Now you're claiming it's stolen because you really want it back because I didn't do what I promised I would do. So fine, you're upset with me. Here, take it back. And then you give it right back. And that's why, it's not a complete denial. Now we have a different question on a different line. To'eba derech mitzativ, I found it while I was wandering, and I found it and I picked it up and I took it home. Lemi ba'ilach la'aduri. The guy should say you should have returned it to me. So why didn't he return it? Well, obviously, I'm Rav Sheshet b'omel shvua aveda matzati b'lo ayiti yodeh shishalcha shachziren alach. Right? You could claim I didn't know it was yours to return it to you. Okay, now we're going to go off on something else. Tanya, Amar ben Azai. We're going to read ben Azai, and then we're going to have some different explanations of what ben Azai says. Ben Azai said, Shalosh shvuotim. When you deny that someone asked you to testify about something that you claim you don't know anything about or you don't know enough about. So someone says, my lost item, I think you have information about it, and I say, I don't know anything about it. And it turns out, Hikir Bava lo b'motza. I really did know where the shore is. I just didn't know who found it. Or b'motza v'lo ba. Or I know who found it, I didn't know it was yours. Or lo ba v'lo b'motza. Or I didn't know it was yours, I didn't know who found it. Okay, well, that doesn't make any sense because we're trying to find something where it was a partial. Lo ba v'lo b'motza. In other words, we want to find out where you lied and said, I don't know anything, and you really knew something. If you didn't know the person or you didn't know who found it, then you were telling the truth, right? You were lying, telling the truth. So they say, no, change the end part. Ema ba ubimotza. What it means is, no, you lied and you actually knew everything about it. You knew who had found it and you knew whose animal it was. And yet you lied and said, I didn't know anything under oath. So now these are three potential whatever. So the Gemara says, what are you trying to say here? So Rav Amram, Rabbi Chanina, liftol. Rabbi Ami says in the name of Rabbi Chanina that he meant to exempt you. In these cases, you're going to be exempt. Ushmuel amar lechiyuv. You're going to be obligated. Okay, so now it's very confusing. What's going on here? So this is going to connect with our last issue of mammon. Is this a claim that can lead to your lying? Could it have led to some monetary issue? Did you cause a loss? Okay. This is what it's based on the machloket, and then we'll go into it. Hamashpia ed echad patur. If someone causes an aid to take an oath, mashpia ed echad is going to be exempt. Okay. You, 1 second. Mashpia, I just want to remember what this is. 1 second. Right. You, You ask one aide to testify about a situation. If you ask one aide to testify, you're exempt. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, mechayev. You asked one aide to testify, and the aide says, I won't testify. Now, aide echad can't obligate someone to pay something. But what can it do? It can obligate a shvuah. So if an aide echad says, you have something that's someone else, like mine, let's say, you would have to take a shvuah. And if you're not willing to take a shvuah, you'd actually have to pay me. So it's something that could potentially cause payment, because you'll have to pay me if you're not willing to take an oath. But on the other hand, I can't obligate you to pay. If you take an oath, then you don't have to pay. So again, it's this tricky thing, which potentially could cause you to have to pay, but not necessarily. So if you're mashpia eid echad, and then the aide says, I don't know anything, and then it turns out the aide lied, they're exempt because they weren't necessarily going to be able to cause you to pay money anyway. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon mechayev. So b'may kamiflage, what's the root of their machloket? Mar savar davar goyim lemamon k'mamon dami, mar savar lav k'mamon dami, right? That's exactly the machloket. Is it mamon? Is it not mamon? Right? Is it because there's potential? So now, how does this relate back? So now this is the question. In the case of the person saying, so either some people say the issue is that it was one aide. One aide can't make you be able to claim, be clear that that person found your item and stole it. It's just one witness's testimony. But a better way of saying it, I think, is that, again, different commentaries suggest different explanations. It's actually hard to understand the connection. They say that what's going on here? If you say, certainly in the first two claims, this is the last claim you'd have to, where you said, I know the person, I know who it was your animal. But if they say one or the other, it's not clear you're going to be able to find your animal. So it wasn't testimony that was really able to get you definitively to somewhere. On the other hand, it could potentially get you to somewhere. So it would be the same kind of machloket. So if it's potentially could, do we view that as, oh yeah, and then you denied it, so you're liable? Or do we say, no, potential is only potential, it's not definitive, it's not considered mammon, so when you denied it and you lied, you won't have to pay. You won't have to compensate. Okay, I'm a Rav Sheshet. Now we get to another halach. HaKofer b'pikadon na'aseh alav gazlan v'chaya b'otz. This is a fascinating question. You're watching someone's item, and we talked about this before, and then you claim it's your own. Question is, at what point do you become a thief? When you just say no, or do you have to take the oath to be called a gazlan? So now we've been talking about you took an oath. What if you just denied someone's claim? Rav Sheshet comes and puts the line earlier and says, as soon as you deny the claim, you're a thief. Now, why is it relevant that you're a thief? Either which way, you have to return the item. But remember, a shomer is exempt in certain cases. Onus, right? Depending on what kind of shomer you are. But perhaps if someone steals it or it gets lost, if you're a shomer china. Once you say, I stole it, right? Once you become a thief, remember, you have to pay the original value no matter what. It doesn't matter what happens to it. You have to pay for what you stole. So it's very important to know at what point you become a thief, because if something happens to the item, it'll be relevant whether or not you have to return it. So that's what he says. He claims that as soon as you say, I don't have your item, that already makes you a thief. And then you become liable in onsim or whatever else you would be liable in. Vitana tuna, and I'm going to prove it from a braita. It says, lamadu onesh. From Bechecheshba, we learn that there's a punishment. Okay, now, Azhara minayim, where do we get the azhara, right? What's the onesh that you have to pay the chomesh and all that, and the asham? Where is the azhara, the warning? You always have to have a lo taseh to be punished. Talmud lomar lo tichachashu. This is in a different section in Parshat Kedoshim, in Vayikra Yutet. Don't deny claims, right? Don't steal, don't deny. My lav laonesh mamon. Isn't this saying mamon? Okay, isn't this saying mamon payment, which means, one second, just want to get this clear. Right, this is just saying, right, what they're saying here is that if you say, if you say the and the warning is don't deny sounds like don't deny even without swearing. It didn't say swear, just said don't deny. So now they say, no, that doesn't prove that a denial, okay, Rav Sheshet, you can't prove from there. You could just say that's la'onesh shvua. It's only if you took an oath. Hamidikatani seifa, they say no, but the seifa says v'ishtaba michlal dereisha delo ishtaba. The next part of that was talking about shvua. So the beginning must not be talking about shvua, which would prove Rav Sheshet. How do we know that? Dikatani seifa bin nishba al sheker, which is the continuation of that pasuk. Lamanu onesh azhara minayin lo tishak Talmud lomar lo tishakru. There it's talking about lying under oath. And then it would be proof for Rav Sheshet because the beginning part is talking about denying it without an oath. Amre, they say, no. Idi v'idi de'ishtaba. Kan hoda, kan shabau edim. They say, no, what's the difference? The shvua one is where you were nishba and you denied it and then admitted it. The first part was where you denied it and then witnesses came and convicted you. So they could both be talking about denying with an oath. Okay, and then that doesn't prove anything. To edim chayav b'onsim, right? Once the edim come, you're obligated in onsim. Oduye ode chayav b'kerem b'chomesh v'asham, and that's the difference between the reisha and seifa. In the beginning part, you're only going to be chayav, onsim and the value of it. But if you admit your claim, then you get added the chomesh and the asham, and that's the second part. But they could all be based on the shvua, okay? And therefore, it doesn't prove Rav Sheshet. Okay, we're going to stop here for now. We're going to start tomorrow with questions on Rav Sheshet's interesting approach. Okay, so we'll try to do a quick review of today's stuff. A bit of a long one to do a review on, but let's see what we can get. Use my summary, it'll help me. First, we resolved two answers to the contradiction. Between the Mishna and the braita, we have Rav Nachman and Rava. Then we went on to, then Rava started. We talked about the pruta and whether you actually have to return the item if it's less than a pruta according to Rav Papa, because maybe it'll go up in value or not. Then we have Rava, who started with a statement and then started raising questions, right, about something that was a pruta went down, or it was a pruta, you return part and not the whole thing. From there, he jumped to nazir. From there, he jumped to impurity and about this half thing. Then, where it's like missing something complete. Then we went to this whole thing of the something that could cause potential financial, right? Is the world of shvuat v'rat mamon, where you have to pay, you deny a monetary claim, you have to pay the chomesh and the asham. Does it apply in a case where there's only potential monetary gain to your claim or not? That was a huge question. We kind of sided on yes, you do, but we had some questions about it. Rav Amram raised questions against Raba, and as Rava asked the question, Raba had an answer to it that he knew already. He wasn't questioning Rava's question, and Rav Amram questioned Rava. And then we got off on this another issue where it ended up talking about the shalosh shvuot ben Azai, which also split into this machloket. Do we think something that potentially could cause a gain is or not mammon? And then we ended with this Rav Sheshet opinion, which we're going to get into more tomorrow. With that, we'll finish today's daf. Wishing everybody a good day and b'sorot tovot.